which he began with a synopsis. He said that Bhagavat-dharma can be defined by understanding that Bhagavat is derived from Bhagavan, and then he described the 6 opulences that qualifies the Supreme Lord as such. And he said Bhagavat also refers to his devotees. Bhagavat-dharma is the relationship between the devotee and the Lord. And we can rise into that relationship by the effects of Krishna's holy name. So this was a pavilion at the time, and the altar was right there, with Srila Prabhupada on the left, with a beautiful painting of Lord Gauranga behind him. And then on the center altar was Sri Radha Damodar. And on the far right, from our perspective, was our big Lord Jagannath. Sri Krishna Janmashtami and Sri Vyasa Puja formed the natural heart of the Bhagavat-dharma discourse. And we hear so many appreciations of Sri Krishna's arrangement that Srila Prabhupada appear in this world on Nandotsava. And at this setting, in 1972, we witnessed another very special perspective of that truth. Being with Srila Prabhupada, Janmashtami, as he led us in the worship of Sri Radha Vrindaban Chandra, and how that Janmashtami festival overlapped with Sri Vyasa Puja, and we saw the reciprocation from the previous day, Srila Prabhupada leading us in the worship of Radha Vrindavan Chandra. The next day, Lord Krishna appearing here to honor their pure devotee. And so appropriate that the deities happen to be Radha Damodar, who were with Vishnujan Swami's traveling Sankirtan party at the time, who happened to be here, and Jagannath. Because as we know, Srila Prabhupada has a very special relationship with Sri Radha Damodar. When Srila Prabhupada was a young child, he refused to go to school. So his parents hired a man named Damodar to tie him around the waist and take him to school. And when Srila Prabhupada escaped from school, Damodar would chase him and carry him in his arms back. And then, of course, residing in Radha Damodar Mandir in Vrindaban, with the inspiration of Srila Jiva Goswami Samadhi as the preparation for him coming to the West. And then, of course, Srila Prabhupada has such a unique relationship with Jagannath. There again, as a child, just young child, you know the story when he insisted that his father purchase a Rath cart. And now Srila Prabhupada himself, young child, arranged and orchestrated, inspired an 8-day festival for Rath Yatra, telling all the neighbors what to cook, with an emphasis on kachoris. And the neighbors, they would ask, Gaur Mohan, why didn't you invite us to this festival? He said, it's child's play. Oh? Saying it's child's play? You're neglecting us? And then, when Srila Prabhupada completed his 4-year college education, he passed the exams. But he refused to show up to receive his diploma, registering his protest with Gandhi refusing to participate in the occupational invasive tendencies of the British government. As soon as he completed his college education, he had a major decision to make. Would he go to Vrindaban or Jagannath Puri? And he chose Puri. So, this is another first, the first week-long Bhagavat-dharma discourse in the Western world. Another first transpiring right here in New Vrindavan. So seeing Srila Prabhupada on that altar, with that beautiful painting of Lord Gauranga behind him, the most magnanimous of all avatars who descended in this world to distribute that unique love of Vrindavan, a mood of devotion never offered before. And access to that treasure of Braj Bhakti is accessible only through the lives, the pastimes, the precepts of the devotees, who are so rich with the sweetness of Vrindavan that they are worthy of endless recitation, because that's most pleasing to Bhagavan and most uplifting to our souls as well. And that's the only means to understand the true nature of bhakti. And so by dint of such narrations, we become attracted to the compassion of the devotees and develop natural affection for them. Lord Krishna's grace incarnates in his pure devotee. Therefore, the Acharya is addressed as his divine grace. The ocean of mercy, who feels acutely the pain of conditioned souls and prays to Krishna on their behalf. And Sri Krishna cannot refuse the heart-rending prayers of his devotees. And he responds, which is the beginning of good fortune blossoming in our lives. So, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam tell us that out of thousands or millions of conditioned souls, one may endeavor for liberation or self-realization. And amongst thousands who have attained that goal, Krishna says, hardly one knows me in truth. Meaning that liberation, freedom from the flawed condition of material conditioning, pales in comparison to pure devotion and Krishna's pure devotees. And while there are so many means to achieve liberation or self-realization, yoga, dhyana, meditation, pure devotional service knows no techniques. It depends on absolute purity of heart and perfect surrender, which Srila Prabhupada demonstrated to perfection, setting the stage for the drama of divine love to unfold, which it did right here, exactly 50 years ago. Slight correction for his history. Srila Prabhupada first came up on the palanquin carried by four devotees, the palanquin built by our dear Somadas. He found that to be quite precarious. So on this day, when Srila Prabhupada arrived from Vrindaban in a Lincoln Continental or whatever it was, worthy of Krishna's representative. At the bottom of the hill, he got into Hayagriva's Volkswagen Bug, and the representative, the ambassador of the spiritual world, arrived right here in a VW Beetle, which was sweet and charming to such an extent that we never would have imagined. And that set a trend to follow. Bhagaraj Prabhu began a very gentle, sweet, melodic kirtan, very beautifully establishing the ambience. And then Vishnu Jan Swami took over leading the kirtan in his unique classic style, infusing the atmosphere with bhava. And Srila Prabhupada was very visibly affected. He was swaying back and forth, playing cartels, with his eyes tightly closed as if trying to restrain the emotions, which he couldn't do beyond a certain point. He took the lead of the kirtan, at which point it was as if the heavens opened and the love of God rained down upon us and the devotees went wild. And then he gave his beautiful class, so in such a complete way, explaining what Vyasa Puja means. Now there was a lot of guests and reporters present at the time, and he addressed them largely. He said, he began his lecture by saying, those who are my students, they understand what this ceremony means, but those who are guests might not. And so that there be no misunderstanding, I will explain. You may be wondering, why is this person sitting on an elevated seat, accepting worship as God, while talking about humility? And he explained. He gave the example of his own childhood in Calcutta, where, under British rule, the viceroy would come to accept alms, honor, donations on behalf of the British Crown. He was not allowed to touch or keep any of that. It all went to the royal treasury. So he said the role of the Acharya is similar. He comes on behalf of Krishna, the ambassador of the spiritual world on this dimension, and he accepts the praise, the worship, the contributions of his followers, but he never thinks that any of it's for him. He delivers it all to Krishna. And as our praise through him raises upward, ultimately, through Guru Parampara, 6 Goswamis, Gornidai, to Radha Krishna, their blessings descend in return. And observing this was the integration of so many prophecies, which all coalesced in the horoscope done with Srila Prabhupada's birth, which delighted his father to no end, because Gormohan Dey prayed for a son who would be a pure devotee of Srimati Radharani, preaching Srimad Bhagavatam, leading kirtans and bhajans. And when the horoscope was read that this child, at the age of 70, will cross the ocean, become an exponent of the eternal religion, Sanatana Dharma, open 108 temples, However great a display of devotion we may portray, if we are negligent in respecting and serving the Acharya, Krishna will not pay the slightest attention to our offering, because he will taste the pride. So, there's no other way to approach the Lord other than the footsteps of the Acharyas. Who Lord Krishna revealed to Uddhava. There again, you have to qualify the statement. Krishna tells Uddhava, the Acharya is myself, meaning his representative. Never disrespect or neglect him in any way, because he is the abode of all the gods. At the end of the ceremony, during the ceremony, Srila Prabhupada used the analogy. If you want to impress a rich man, it may take a lot of wealth. But if you simply give a 2-cent lozenge to his child, or simply pet his dog, you will easily win his favor. And then after the lecture, one reporter asked Srila Prabhupada, how do you compare yourself to Jesus Christ? And Srila Prabhupada said, Jesus is the Son of God. I am the dog of God. Which in Vaishnava culture is a very exalted position. So, the integration of the kirtans, the lecture, the loving relationships displayed amongst the Vaishnavas, revealed in subtle form a world made of song, and where 7 temples on 7 hills became a very tangible reality. So, Janmashtami, that was the day that Sri Sri Radha Vrindavan Chandra moved in their new temple at the foot of the hill. And Srila Prabhupada wanted to hear Krishna book. Most of you have heard this before, but you might hear a slightly different angle today. So the devotees read the Advent chapter, which is very charming and enlivening. And at the end, thus ends the Bhakti-vedanta purport, and the devotees chanted Jai. And then Srila Prabhupada said, next chapter, which is the prayers of the demigods, which is extremely Aishwarya philosophy, which to Brijabasis has the natural effect of putting them in a state of yoga nidra. And I'm sure you've heard the descriptions, the dundas were just swaying back and forth like grass in the wind, and heads are bopping against the wall, and the devotees are massaging one another, trying to keep each other awake. Cut through the chapter. Thus ends the Bhakti-vedanta purport to the second chapter, prayers of the demigods. And then the devotees were very ecstatic, Jai, and then Srila Prabhupada said, next chapter. By the end of the 3rd chapter, hearing the mantra, thus ends the Bhakti-vedanta purport, and the Jai was not quite as enthusiastic. But you see, what was transpiring the whole time was that as the devotees were what you would say in the vernacular nodding out, Srila Prabhupada was visibly demonstrating the antithesis. he was becoming more enlivened, more alert, more awake, and just, he appeared to be glowing with ever-increasing ecstasy to such a degree that he appeared to be oblivious to the fact that the audience was mostly asleep. Until the end of the third chapter, when he came back to some semblance of external reality and saw that everyone was pretty much asleep. So then he said, these devotees are tired. Now it's about midnight. He said, take prasadam. And then very enthusiastically, Jai. So, I see many familiar faces in the audience who are here at the time. And it's special for some of us because Kripa Mahaprabhu, where are you? Were you aware of the prohibition in Brooklyn that we were not allowed to discuss New Vrindavan?
Yes.
There was a strict mandate coming down from the temple president that we were not allowed to discuss New Vrindavan. So we had to have secret meetings at night when everybody went to sleep in the basement of the temple. And to receive permission to come here was extremely impossible. But then when the occasion came, Srila Prabhupada was going to be here for Janmashtami and Sri Vyasa Puja. And we asked our authorities, and they were not happy to give their blessings, but they were not in any position to say no. So, took their advantage. And entered the spiritual frontier to become inmates. So thank you all for your enthusiastic participation in what you could call recreation, which actually means recreation of this momentous event. First ever Bhagavat-dharma discourse in the Western world. In Vrindaban, the site of Srila Prabhupada's very first farm community. ISKCON's first cow, first plow department. So many precedents in the world established here in Vrindaban. And today was really the essence of all of them. Being with Srila Prabhupada as he led us in the worship of Sri Sri Vrindaban Chandra. And we saw the overlapping of events in Sri Sri Radha Damodar and Lord Jagannath came here to honor Srila Prabhupada on the most blessed event of Sri Vyasa Puja. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.